If this story of courage and honor moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories, and leave a comment telling us what you would have done in the biker's place. Lucy's Diner was more than just a roadside stop on Highway 95. It was an institution. A low-slung building smelling perpetually of brewing coffee, sizzling bacon, and maple syrup. A comforting beacon for those traveling the long, empty stretches of the interstate. The chrome plating of the stools at the counter gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting the morning sun attempting to penetrate the large front windows. On this particular Saturday morning, the atmosphere was routine and peaceful, a predictable rhythm of clattering plates and murmured conversation. In the back corner booth, a territory they had claimed for years, sat 8 members of the Thunder Knights Motorcycle Club. Their heavy, custom-fitted black leather vests, emblazoned with the imposing club patch, a thunderhead splitting a helmeted skull, offered a sharp, powerful contrast to the checkered floor and pastel upholstery of the diner. Outside, their meticulously maintained motorcycles, a row of powerful, gleaming machines that hummed with latent energy, announced their presence. Lucy, the owner, didn't bat an eye. She had served them coffee and breakfast for 15 years, a tenure marked by quiet respect and zero trouble. She considered them, despite their intimidating appearance, some of her most reliable patrons. Victor Kane, a man whose physical presence was matched only by the quiet intensity in his eyes, was midway through a towering stack of buttermilk pancakes, lost in the simple pleasure of a weekend meal. His thoughts were miles away from confrontation, focused instead on the perfect ratio of syrup to butter. The sudden, violent rupture of the diner's front door was a physical shockwave that instantly cleared his mind. It didn't just open, it burst inward with a sickening crack. The small, decorative brass bell that usually chimed a welcome ripping from its fixture and clattering loudly onto the tiled floor. The sound was an unnatural violence interrupting domestic peace. All conversation ceased. The atmosphere turned instantly from cozy to tense. A small boy, clearly no older than 8, stumbled across the threshold. The sight of him was immediately heartbreaking and visceral. His light blue t-shirt was torn down one side, revealing a raw scrape on his ribs. One cheap, worn sneaker was missing, and his other foot was bare, both soles bloodied and scraped from a desperate, frantic run across asphalt and gravel. His small face, usually bright and innocent, was a mask of sheer terror, covered in dirt and streaked with tears that hadn't dried, having mixed with the grime. The air seemed to compress with the force of his anguish. "Please help!" he screamed, his voice thin and cracking, straining with desperation and fear that was too profound for a child his age. "They're beating my mama!" The silence that followed was absolute, thick, and horrifically static. Forks, dripping with egg or syrup, froze inches from mouths. Coffee cups were arrested mid-lift. Every single patron, from the solo trucker nursing a black coffee to the family in the next booth, stared at the crying child, a tableau of stunned, passive shock, unsure if they were witnessing a prank, a cry for attention, or something truly terrible. But while the other customers sat rigid and unsure, the 8 men in the back corner moved instantly, as if a silent shared signal had been given and instantaneously obeyed. They didn't need a committee meeting or a moment of ethical debate. A chorus of chairs scraped harshly against the linoleum, the heavy thud of leather-clad boots hitting the floor. A sequence of 8 powerful impacts was the decisive sound of hesitation ending. Victor, the first to reach the boy, didn't loom over him. He lowered his powerful, massive frame, kneeling down to the child's level, consciously making himself less intimidating than the large man in black leather that he was. The scent of leather and machine oil replaced the smell of breakfast. "Where is she, son?" Victor's voice was a low rumble, stripped of any aggression, yet carrying a resonance of absolute, deadly seriousness, a tone that demanded the truth. The boy, shaking uncontrollably, pointed with a trembling hand across the street to a rundown motel parking lot visible through the diner window. "Room 14, he whispered, his voice catching. "My mama's boyfriend. He's hurting her real bad. Please, mister, please help her." Victor looked back at his 7 brothers, who were already standing shoulder to shoulder behind him. Snake, a massive, quiet man; Riggs, the former military medic; Bones, Axel's nephew Jax, and the others. 7 pairs of eyes met his, and every one of them nodded, their expressions uniform in grim resolve. No discussion, no debate, no spoken agreement was necessary. They had taken a solemn oath years ago, when the Thunder Knights formalized their code: protect those who can't protect themselves, especially kids, especially women seeking refuge from violence. "We've got you, kid," Victor assured him, standing up. The air of lethal competence returned to him. He turned his head slightly towards the counter. "Lucy, call 911 right now. Tell them it's a domestic assault in room 14 at the motel across the street." The motel across the street, the Sunnyside Inn, was the kind of place synonymous with desperation and transient isolation. It was an unofficial policy there that people minded their own business and kept their curtains tightly closed. Peeling paint covered the cinder-block walls, and the parking lot was a chaotic patchwork of cracks, potholes, and neglected weeds. Room 14 was unmistakable, not just by its number, but by the terrible, audible chaos erupting from within. The sounds were sickening: a man's voice yelling obscenities and rage-fueled accusations; a woman's voice, high-pitched and broken, crying and begging him to stop, to just leave her alone. Finally, the awful, blunt, non-metallic sound of heavy fists hitting unprotected flesh. The boy, Tyler, began to run ahead, driven by instinct. Snake, the tallest of the bikers, gently placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, his touch surprisingly light. "You stay here, buddy," Snake said, his voice a low, steady anchor. "Let us handle this. Your job is done. You saved her." Victor didn't bother with the formalities of a knock. Respect was not due here. With a swift, powerful economy of motion, he raised his heavy motorcycle boot, braced himself, and kicked the door with every ounce of his power. The cheap, hollow core of the door splintered at the frame, and the door itself flew fully open, slamming against the inside wall with a boom that echoed across the desolate parking lot and down the strip of highway. Inside the small, dirty, cheaply furnished room, the scene was worse than the sounds had suggested. A woman was crumpled on the floor, trapped between the cheap mattress and the wall. Blood was dripping steadily from her nose and mouth, forming a dark stain on the thin carpet. Her left eye was already swelling shut, ballooning grotesquely. Standing over her, his chest heaving, was a large man, Marcus Webb. He was easily over 6 feet tall and built like someone who had spent years focusing on raw, brutish strength. His fist was raised high above his head, ready to deliver a final, potentially fatal blow. "That's enough," Victor said, stepping into the room. His voice was no longer calm. It was low, dangerous, and utterly devoid of mercy. Marcus Webb spun around fast, his eyes wide and wild, glazed over with a volatile cocktail of cheap alcohol and uncontrolled fury. His face, thick and heavy, contorted in aggressive confusion. "Get out of here," he roared, spitting the words. "This is between me and my woman, none of your business." Victor took another step, closing the distance, the other 7 bikers filling the doorway behind him, their large frames effectively blocking the only exit. The small, claustrophobic room felt instantly overwhelmed by their presence. "She's not your woman," Victor corrected him, his voice level. "She's a woman, and you just made it our business when her kid came running for help." Marcus, relying entirely on his imposing physical size and ingrained brutality, sneered at the wall of leather. He clearly believed that brute force was the only currency that mattered. "You think you scare me? I've been in prison. I've fought guys twice as tough as you, biker trash." He then made the single worst mistake of his life. Without warning, He swung a wide, wild, rage-driven punch aimed squarely at Victor's head. Bad choice. Very bad choice. Victor was not fighting out of anger. He was acting with cold, practiced precision. Before the punch could even connect, he caught Marcus's wrist in midair. He didn't just hold it. He twisted the arm sharply, applying pressure to the joint with expert leverage, simultaneously stepping into Marcus's personal space. With one clean, efficient movement, he used the momentum and the captured arm to slam Marcus face first into the cinder block wall. The impact was sickeningly loud and absolute. Marcus dropped instantly to his knees, his massive body reduced to a dazed, confused, and whimpering heap, his mind utterly incapable of processing what had just happened. Two bikers, Bones and Jax, were on him instantly, grabbing Marcus's flailing arms and pinning them behind his back, securing him firmly to the floor. Meanwhile, Riggs, the ex-Army medic, moved past the confrontation and rushed over to the woman. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" Riggs asked gently, his voice soft, professional, and focusing only on the victim. His trained eyes were already scanning her injuries, prioritizing the potential internal trauma. "My ribs," she gasped, struggling desperately for air. "He kicked me there! And Tyler! Where's Tyler? Where's my son?" "Right here, Mama." Tyler, unable to stay back any longer, pushed past Snake and threw himself onto his mother, wrapping the small, surprisingly careful arms around her waist. He was crying harder now, but these were tears of release, not terror. "I got help, Mama. The bikers came. You're safe now. You're safe." The woman, Rebecca Martinez, held her son tight with one trembling arm. The pain shooting through her body was a secondary concern. Tears of relief and gratitude streamed down her bruised face as she looked up at Victor with her one good, unswollen eye. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Thank you so much. He would have killed me this time. I know he would have." Victor nodded once, his jaw tight, his eyes still fixed on the man on the floor. "Not today," he promised. "Not ever again."
Within what felt like only a few minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, cutting through the silence of the highway strip. Sheriff Tom Cruise pulled up in his patrol car, an ambulance right behind him. Cruise was a good man, a veteran lawman who knew the score. He knew the Thunder Knights well. They held annual charity rides, helped with the town's Christmas toy drives for underprivileged kids, and were an unwritten agreement of stability in his county. "What happened here, Victor?" the sheriff asked, surveying the scene. The battered door, the woman on the stretcher, the two massive bikers holding a struggling Marcus Webb. "Kid ran into Lucy's diner crying for help," Victor explained simply, his account factual and concise. "Says Mama's boyfriend was beating her. We found Marcus here doing exactly that. We stopped him. That's the whole story." The sheriff looked at Marcus, still being held, then at Rebecca, who was being carefully loaded onto a stretcher by paramedics. Tyler refused to let go of her hand and was permitted to climb into the ambulance with her. Cruise had responded to calls about Marcus Webb before, 3 times in the past 6 months, actually. Each time, Rebecca had been too terrified, too broken, or too financially dependent to press charges. "Rebecca," the sheriff said gently, leaning over the stretcher, "do you want to press charges this time?" Rebecca looked at Marcus, whose eyes, bloodshot and filled with pure hatred, were glaring a terrible promise at her. Then she looked past the sheriff to the wall of 8 bikers standing between her and all danger. 8 men she didn't even know, who had risked everything to save her life. "Yes," she said, and the single word was stronger and clearer than anything she had spoken in months. "I want to press charges for everything he's done to me." The sheriff smiled grimly, a sense of overdue justice settling over him. "Good. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for assault, battery, attempted grievous bodily harm, and about 6 other charges I'll think of on the way to the station." As Marcus was hauled away in handcuffs, still struggling against the officers, he shouted back at Rebecca with venom dripping from every word. "I'll be out tomorrow. I'll make bail and I'll find you. You can't hide from me." No, Victor said quietly, stepping between Marcus and the ambulance, his voice a definitive promise. You won't. That evening, Victor and two of his brothers, Snake and Riggs, visited the county hospital. They found Rebecca in a room on the 3rd floor. Tyler was curled up beside her on the narrow hospital bed, both of them sleeping peacefully. A shared weight lifted. It was probably the first real, fear-free rest either of them had gotten in months. The first sleep not interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps or a slammed door. A nurse named Angela approached them quietly in the hallway, her expression a mix of exhaustion and profound respect. You're the bikers who saved her, aren't you? We helped, Victor corrected, his unease with the term hero evident. Angela's eyes were fierce with emotion. He told me everything while we were treating her. That monster has been terrorizing her for 8 months straight. She tried to leave him twice before. Both times he found her and beat her even worse. She was running out of options, running out of hope. He had broken her spirit. She's got options now, Victor said firmly, his eyes fixed on the door to her room. She's got hope now, too. We'll make sure of it. When Rebecca finally woke up an hour later, she immediately started crying again, but not from the sharp physical pain. It was the overwhelming, crushing realization of relief, which was instantly followed by the bitter, learned fear. He'll make bail, she said, her voice shaking violently. He always does. His brother owns a bail bonds company. He'll be out by tomorrow morning, and he knows where I live. He knows where I work. He knows everything about me. I have nowhere to go. Victor pulled up a chair and sat down beside her bed, his large, powerful frame an immovable object. Not this time, Rebecca. We're not letting that happen. And even if he somehow does get out, I promise you, he'll have to go through all 23 of us first, and we don't plan on moving. I don't understand, she said, confusion mixing with immense, bewildering gratitude. Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know who we are. You're strangers. Victor glanced down at Tyler, still sleeping peacefully, his small face finally relaxed. Your boy had real courage today. He could have frozen. He could have hidden. Instead, he ran for help, knowing the risk. That took guts. Can't walk away from courage like that. When he needed a shield, he found us. The Thunder Knights called an emergency, all-hands-on-deck meeting at their clubhouse that same night. 23 members, the entire chapter, showed up within an hour. Word had spread fast about the motel rescue, and every member wanted to know the details and the next course of action. The clubhouse, usually reserved for boisterous meetings and mechanical work, was unusually somber and focused. Rebecca Martinez and her son Tyler need our protection, Victor explained to the group, standing at the head of the long table. Marcus will probably make bail within a few days. When he does, he'll come looking for them. She has no money saved up because she's been running from him for months. She has no family in this area, no safe place to go. We have an opportunity to make a permanent difference. Axel, the club president, a tough, respected Vietnam veteran who had founded the chapter on a strict moral code, leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful and piercing. What exactly are you proposing, Victor? Full club protection, Axel, Victor replied without hesitation. We coordinate, we find her a safe, secure apartment across town. We help her get back on her feet financially, cover her first month's rent, maybe a security deposit, and most importantly, we make damn sure Marcus understands, through every channel possible, that touching her or her son again means dealing with all of us, permanently.